I have to get my wife back, but I can't abandon her. And if you help me, I won't abandon you.
It was intense. I actually literally was in the room because the way that location is on a stage. And so when I would step off when I wasn't working, I could see in through the window. And so I was so interested in what Adam was doing because I think the work that he did in that scene is mind-blowing. Because as we've known through the last 2 seasons, I think the way that he differentiates between those 2 characters, Zowdy and Zinni, is nothing short of virtuosic. But this is like a really amplified version of that. I was excited to watch, but it was also interesting within the scenes to get to interact with his Annie, because that's something that had been sort of a low boil for Devon since the end of season 1 was, who is this person? You know, the brother I know, his body has co-opted the brother that I know, because it is now living half of his life as someone else. And so when she gets to interact with Annie Mark, I think it is a real eye-opener. And until that point, I think she has hoped that it has been hypothetical. She has hoped that this is more of a philosophical difference of opinion she has with Mark instead of an actual dangerous one. And then coming to know what she does about Gemma, of course, throws that all on the floor. I think when people are truly pushed to the brink and are experiencing abject desperation, they don't really have the luxury of trust. I think she knows in this moment it's now or never, and knows based on what she's learned about what Luma is capable of, what they're planning to do, and how dangerous they are to her brother. She is really at a, pardon my French, but a f it moment where she knows there is no other avenue. And she says it to Mark, you know, in episode 9 where they meet in the clearing. She's like, you think I want to do this? But we don't have a choice. I mean, what else do we do? Sit on our hands until they kill Gemma? So I think that it was also interesting for me to be physically aware of what's happening for Devon in that moment. She's still breastfeeding a newborn. She hasn't slept. She's just come off of a 48-hour on and off again fight with her husband about him acquiescing to the Lumen's request to collab with them. So everything in her life is on fire in that moment. And so I think that also helps push her to the point of making a huge leap. I don't think she trusts Cobell as far as she can flicker, but I think she just knows she has to go big or go home. That's all there is.
Oh, it was wonderful and, you know, quite cathartic because I've lived with this character for so long, and you know, I really do care for her and care about the way that Mark cares for her. It wasn't, you know, the easiest sort of transition to make, because the way they work with like being the innie going through the threshold, like that transition happened so quickly. So, you know, it took a bit to sort of like bury all of those feelings. But once they came out, like the moment just sort of happened, and Adam's such a, you know, gorgeous and wonderful person, scene partner to work with, and he's so invested and so committed to this role that it just flowed, you know. It wasn't a scene where we were like, how are we gonna do this? It just felt right. Yeah, it was utterly devastating, you know, absolutely devastating. And that scene where she's banging on the door, you know, there were some technical elements, but once we got to that moment and we just like went for it, I actually had a hard time. I couldn't stop crying. And usually I'm very good at separating like the character to me. So once they say cut, you know, I catch my breath, and then, you know, I'm good at separating the two. But yeah, that moment I couldn't stop crying, and I had to, you know, just like take a moment, because it is so sad.
There were earlier drafts that did see the sort of getaway car plan, that did literalize that. So I think the idea was, even though we don't see that had the plan gone accordingly, they would have absconded with Gemma, probably in Devon's weird little jalopy beater truck, and put it away. But as we know, that doesn't happen. So I imagine Devon is left in an incredibly awkward moment with Cobell trying to figure out what's happening now, because she can't access Lumen and the frustration. So it will be interesting for me if and when we do pick up the story to see where she is.
Yeah, I have no idea where they're going to take it. I have 100% faith in Dan Erickson, though. He's such a brilliant person. And, you know, if we get a chance, I just can't wait to see what he comes up with.
Well, the actor Mark Geller, who is the representation of Kier, was on set with us, and he gave his voice to that. But a fun fact, the animatronic nature of that being was done by Ben Stiller. So this was a really great exercise in acting with Ben Stiller. And so we were finding it while we were on set, like, how does the Kier statue move? How do we move together? When do I turn away from him? How slow is the move? So it was a really, really great exercise, you know, and in the context of the show and where the mindset of where Milchick is in this moment, I think, again, it's this demonstration, or this illustration rather, of how he is being attacked on so many different levels, and now he's getting it from a statue. You know, they're policing his speech yet again, and it's like come on, here we go, all over.
I hadn't done any combat since Game of Thrones. That had been a conscious decision that it wasn't something I wanted to do anymore. But when Ben Stiller says there's a fight scene in Severance, and it is as outlandish, bizarre, and strange psychic explosion as this one was, I found it irresistible. And I was delighted to go back into a more serious form of training that would enable me to carry out the fight. And that's when the fight informed me, as all fights do, but particularly this one, that this is an ultimate emotional explosion. And this is a transformation of self and a real change from one state as a company player under duress is carrying out acts that they increasingly don't believe in, to becoming a primitive, angry and violent force. A total change of character in that moment was thrilling. I think Mark S. provides an emergency moment of contact. And it feels like Mark S. is special. We know he's the main focus of the story, but it feels that he is special in some way, that he is the chosen one. And he is able to contact Lorne when she's in her most energized, transformed, destructive, unimaginable, violent state, to find the humanity to stop her in that moment, to realize that she's behaving as the person and force she hates behaves. She has been overtaken by the spell of their behavior. So he is able to have a strange and intense moment of connection, which I think does also happen in episode 3. Lorne's clearly irritated by him, but there's some level of connection there. And that is the moment that stops Lorne from killing Drummond, because we know that's what she would do, because the motion is so, or the action is so free flowing that that's its natural conclusion. Yeah, I mean, so many different possibilities. I think I was going with like leaning into her feeling confused. Like, she's like, what does this mean? I mean, part of her feels so defeated because she's just recently tried to escape, and, you know, she feels so, like, when she sinks to the floor in the elevator, I think at that moment, like, part of her, I feel, is like slowly feels like she's letting go. And so when she sees that, I think she doesn't want to get hopeful, but she's like, oh, there is something obviously different about this room, and I wonder what it means. But she's so used to have them messing around with her that she doesn't want to have a false sense of hope. So I think I just lived in that space.
There's a stark transition between the introduction of the Kier hymn and the Ballad of Gunnel and Ambrose, right? I think it's not for naught, and I'm so glad that Ben listened to my suggestion on this, where the Kier hymn was very traditional. It's a military style. And then we have this ballad, and this ballad allows Milchick to let loose, and we see this band adopt this HBCU, you know, flavor, and they're having fun and getting down on the separate floor. And I believe that is an indication of Milchick finding himself in the midst of this company and where he fits in this company, if he fits at all. I could develop a lot of theories, but it's best for me not to, because they come up with a whole idea and scheme that I can't imagine. You know, I was really proud of that moment. I actually did my own stunts with that. I legitimately knocked down the vending machine, and the vending machine was heavy. That was not, you know, tied to a track and someone pulling it. It was me ramming the hell out of that thing to get out of there. And kicking it, and so it was a lot of fun. It was a great way to get a lot of aggression out, you know, on the floor. You know, but what happens to him, you know, it remains a mystery. And here we are in another instant where Milchick has developed this elaborate activity, you know, the choreography and merriment, you know, this vaudeville act with Kier, and it blows up in his face. And he now has to deal with the consequences.